fine. Yeah, don't forget to do that. So hey, everyone, in the room and online, I'm excited to be here today to talk about this topic. And I could probably talk about this all day and for weeks to to this one thing. So it's going to be kind of condensed presentation. I think it's going to be a lot of information, but it's something just to kind of spark your mind and get you to start to think about things and to research things. And actually, I want to ask a question. I'll try to leave room for questions at the end too. But does anyone have any like thoughts about what sustainable fashion is? What does it mean? What's fashion's impact on the climate? Anyone? Maybe you heard something. Anyone want to share?
Thing downstairs last month, it's a display that Vanderbilt has on fashion and impacts
Oh,
on climate.
okay. So we're just saying that there was a display at Vanderbilt that talked about fashion and the impacts that it has on the climate. Anyone else?
All I know is that I'm like he said, I've seen articles where the proliferation of some of the big clothiers, low cost clothing has created this overflow
Yeah.
of stuff that we don't know what to do with, and it ends up in places that are, house and house where it's dumped or it's not dealt with very well and it hurts the environment. That's
Right. So you're talking about SDG 12, right? I know, right? Sustainable production, overproduction and consumption, right? We're consuming so much and we're producing so much and then it ends up in landfills. And you had one?
Very complicated when we talk about sustainability and fashion and textiles. There are so many issues throughout the supply chain.
You're about to give my presentation. No, but go on.
Thinking about dyes that are used kind of further up in issues, and then as life, it's just all. I appreciate you work on this.
So that's a perfect segue to my presentation because you kind of talked about how we have environmental impacts, like with the dyes and things like that, but then you also talked about the labor impact. So we'll get into that and I might move a little fast, but it's okay. I'll give you ways to research. Let's see. Okay, so you know who I am. So basically, Global Fashion Agenda, they did a report in 2020, the Fashion on Climate report. And it's basically saying that, fashion needs to get its act together because it makes a significant impact. They don't know exactly, and you'll when we talk about the supply chain, you'll understand why. But exactly how much carbon emissions, but they think anywhere from 4 to 10% of carbon emissions just comes from the fashion industry. And I'm sorry, I'm going to skip ahead to this because I really want to kind of talk about what you were talking about. Oh, this is not the, but that's fine. We'll talk through it. So basically you were I did have a diagram that talked about how the fashion industry impacts the climate crisis, right? Or just impacts the world, right? Because 80% of the fashion industry laborers, people that work in the fashion industry are women, right? So we employ a lot of women. And also, of course, I talked about the carbon emissions, but if you think about how many people are employed by the industry, if those people were paid well, that would affect a lot of the SDGs as far as like poverty, hunger. We talked about, dyes that affects clean water and sanitation, gender equality. We talked about SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, and equalities. Like it actually affects a lot of the different SDGs, right? Probably all of them in some way, but we'll get into that. And I talked about that. So you mentioned the supply chain, and that's why this is called the supply chain. And that's basically that, like, what your garment goes through to get to you, right? So if you think about a pair of jeans, you have the cotton that's produced on the farm, that's agriculture, right? And then you have, people have to take that cotton and make it into yarn. And then they have to take that yarn and make it into a fabric. And then there's someone that takes that fabric and actually sews your clothes and makes it into clothes. And then it goes out to you through a brand or a retailer, right? So that's what the fashion industry supply chain, and each part of that supply chain, there are implications for the climate and social issues, right? So for example, the cotton. So I don't know if you remember a while ago, or probably, still, there was a protest of Indian farmers, right? And a lot of them are cotton farmers. There's also stats as far as them like committing suicide and things like that. And, India is one of the largest producers of cotton, but what happens, and you're probably familiar with like agriculture, maybe Monsanto, the seeds and all this big agriculture that happens, right? And so this same thing is happening to cotton farmers, right? Where they're kind of forced to use certain dyes or use certain things, and then they're forced to get loans, but they really don't own their farm. And, all of these things are happening. This is also happening within the fashion industry with cotton, right? And then we mentioned the dyes, right? So I always like to tie this back to how does this affect people? Because your clothes, they have all kinds of dyes in it, especially jeans, the ones I'm wearing right now, right? Even though there's new processes and ways to do things different, but like the dyes in the process, like even with leather, with denim, whatever clothing that you're wearing, there's a lot, right? And if you look at this quote, this is from someone that lives in an area that produces this, right? And they talk about the chemicals. There's no fish in the water. The kids can't play in the water. The water is polluted, right? And so there's a documentary called River Blue, and that actually like shows some of the people where they live here, and they can't even use their water anymore. And it looks like this, like it's all dyed. It's pretty bad. Microplastics. So a lot of people don't realize that your clothes are basically now, especially made out of plastic, like the nylon in your stretch jeans, the polyester that doesn't wrinkle that we like to wear. Those are all synthetic, right? That's plastic. And you know where plastic comes from. That comes from the oil industry, right? And so everything it's now made up of 60% of the material in our clothes. So if you think like back in the day, you used to get like silk and wool and natural fibers, cotton like that. Those things are expensive now, right? To get those natural sustainable fibers that actually biodegrade, right? So a lot of things are made out of plastic. And when you wash those and when you dry them, those microplastics get into the ocean, into the water, into the air that we breathe, right? And so now you can see how the fashion industry is related to that. So let's talk about the labor, right? So we all know about slavery, right? Especially in the United States. So they were mostly picking cotton. What were they picking cotton for? They're picking cotton to industrialize the fashion industry, for clothing, right? And so the fashion industry is a system. It was built on slave labor.
What the hell is happening to Jesus?
Okay. But yeah, so basically this is how, we work in global systems, right? The financial system, the fashion industry is a system, the supply chain is a system, right? And so the way that fashion was built, it was built on low cost or no cost labor, right? And so, but the interesting thing is you think, oh yeah, that happened back in the day. This still happens today, right? It happens today. Gosh, even free labor in our jail system. There's a lot of brands that make clothes with our local jail system. There's factories in LA, New York, things like that, where they're still trying to get garment makers' rights. where they get people that, you know, just need a job and they're not paying them as much as they should be paying them. Also happens in, you know, China, India, you name it, it's still happening today. And I guess when you think of fast fashion, because you mentioned that these brands that you go to and take the time, the brands that you go to and you can buy like a shirt for like $5. Like, I don't know how it went through that whole supply chain and someone actually sewed that shirt and it's only $5. Like, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because of the labor that's so cheap. But then you hear of these larger companies like H&M, Forever 21, their executives are making like billions and billions of dollars, but the people down the supply chain are not making any money. So think about the ethics of that. But that's how the system is built. Okay. So you probably heard of Fashion Revolution. And Fashion Revolution was kind of built on this incident that happened in Bangladesh in 2013. And basically it was a huge fire that happened in a garment factory, right? And the issue is that the brands, the larger brands are always trying to get the garment makers to make things for less money. I want to save more money on, because that's capitalism, right? That's how we work, right? So what happens is that so that factory can get that brand's business, they'll skimp on things. So they'll make people work all day, not take any breaks. Their building may not be up to code. And so that's how this garment factory got burned up, because people couldn't get out. You know, there's all different kind of codes things. And this is not the first or the last one that has happened recently. And so this is a person, like, I always, whenever, like, I'm happy to have this platform for sure. But I can't necessarily speak for a garment maker because I've never been one. But I love Nazarine's story. You can look her up. She is very public. She used to be a garment maker. And she talks about like what her life was like in that. So she talks about sometimes our order would be 500 pieces a week. I would start at 4 a.m. and at 10, and a lot of times people have to travel to these factories to work all week. They don't really see their kids. They're actually not getting paid that much. They're getting paid what's equivalent to like $2 a day. So even though you're doing all this work and then you go home and you can't even feed your family still, you know? So I know everyone's here is like, I need a decent wage because I need to pay my bills, you know, but they're not necessarily able to do that. I'm not going to go into this, but, oh, okay. So I'm going to go into what you were talking about secondhand clothing and what happens to our garments. So approximately 85% of the clothing that Americans consume, nearly 3.8 billion pounds annually, is sent to landfills. So it's interesting because we get clothes that are cheap and they're great because they're cute, but we can't wear them again because they don't really fit or they fall apart when we wash them, right? And so a lot of times we don't even wear our clothes, and maybe that goes to a secondhand shop. There are different opportunities to thrift and things like that, but a lot of that goes to a landfill, and a lot of that goes into, you see these bales of clothing that are just like clothing from thrift shops from the global north, like from the United States, and it goes to, a lot of it goes to this market in Ghana, right? And they take these clothes, and you think about, you know, some of them they'll sell, some of them they can't even use, like they have to throw it away. But what happens is that a lot of that waste is put into these countries in the global south because that's where it's shipped to. They try to do something with it. If they can't, it ends up in their landfill, which you can imagine affects them even more because they're further south. You know, like here, you can kind of tell that the weather's changing with the climate, but imagine if you were closer to the equator, how it's like, oh, it's 100 something degrees, and it shouldn't be, you know? So it really affects that. And also just to note, this is from the Slow Factory, that yes, we are consuming a lot and a lot of it goes to landfills, but there's also fashion brands that if they can't sell their clothes, they'll burn their clothes, versus it going into like a thrift shop or something like that. So there is a lot of waste, but there's also a lot of overproduction that happens. And the reason why, like we used to have fashion seasons, now companies like Zara, they're like, I got to get something new in the store, like every day, every week, it's got to be something new because they want you to consume. Like I'm in marketing, right? So I know, like, you just want people to buy so that you can get more money, right? And so they do whatever they can to get you to consume more and more. So let's talk about solutions. So now that you know, like, what the different issues are, and you know that we're working into a system. So a lot of these companies, of course, they're corporate. And so one of the solutions that I believe would be effective is to hire more people that will make ethical decisions. The fashion industry has kind of been in this mess for a really long time and nothing has changed. But there is power in diversity, right? Because people that are more diverse might have more empathy toward, oh, okay, well, I know this garment worker does not make this much money. I've been in that boat, or someone else, that I know has been in that boat. Let's do something different. And then there's also, because, people like stats behind this, but, and I love this room too, but if your organization is more racial and ethnic diverse, then it's 35% more likely to surpass your peers, right? And that's just because with all of us in this room, we have so many different perspectives, so many different values, so many different ideals. We're able to come up with something even better than other than it just being like a monolith of everyone looks the same, everyone's the same age, everything, right? And so that is one of the solutions, right? When you're trying to shift the system, you go in and it starts to shift slowly toward something different, right? And so it takes hiring people that are diverse to start to shift that system, right? Which is happening slowly, right? I'll talk a little bit about technology, but so I'm not gonna go into that yet. And what can you do? Well, you can vote, right? So you can vote for people, because there's actually there's an act in New York, so they're starting to pass different regulations with the fashion industry. Obviously, the fashion industry is not exactly going to change unless they have some type of regulations. So if you're putting people into office that care about the climate, then that's more likely to happen. Of course, joining advocacy groups, and I'll give you some after this, and also wearing your values. So if you are, I think it's probably the most powerful thing that you can do. If you are maybe even wearing a garment, like everybody wears clothes and maybe you don't care about fashion, but you're like, hey, these pants are 100% cotton, or this is a wool shirt, or I'm wearing this type of sustainable brand, or I thrifted this, or I've had this for like the past 15 years and I wore it like multiple times. You might see me in this once a week. Don't tell anyone. But even stuff like that, like a lot of people think that sustainable fashion is like I have to buy something that costs like $200 because it's made in this, like someone handmade it. Like, you don't have to do it. Just wear the clothes that you have, even if they're from H&M or Zara, or just wear quality clothes, or wear something that you love. Like a lot of people have things that have been passed down and like they love it. Like I have this Rick Owens like leather and denim jacket, and I love it. Like I'm never getting rid of that, right? Because I love that pair of clothing. So just like be more conscious about your choices and wear things that you love, and then talk about that to people about why you're wearing that. And of course, research and support ethical practices. And this is a quote by Malcolm Gladwell. It says, the paradox of the epidemic, that in order to create one contagious movement, you have to create many small movements first. So that means that everyone in this room, everyone on the Zoom online, when you start doing things, that's how it creates this bigger movement. So it really does matter what individual people do. So resources, lots of documentaries out there. The True Cost is like one that everyone talks about. Remake Our World, they actually have stories of garment makers in these different factories all over the world that you can look at. River Blue is the one that was talking about like the denim, the dyes, things like that. And Fashion Revolution, Slow Factory, they talk really deep into these issues, not surface level, like they get into deep about, what's happening. And SDGs, there is a UN partnership for fashion for SDGs. And these are some organizations that you can actually look at: Fashion Takes Action, Fashion Revolution, Remake, of course. So these are organizations that you can join, especially like Remake. They have it where you can sign petitions, you can write letters. They really help you to be kind of an easy way to be an advocate for this. And let's see. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, I did have like an actual longer presentation on the about technology, right? Because I did want to talk about that a lot. I'm kind of in the intersection of sustainable fashion and technology. And I do believe that they can actually work together to make things more sustainable. But it is kind of hard for people to make that connection. So first, I'll talk about digital clothing, right? Has anyone seen any digital clothing? Okay, so does anyone play video games? Yeah. Okay, so in a video game, especially the ones that our kids play, like Roblox, Fortnite, all those games, you can choose like what clothes you can buy. Like if you have kids, your kids are probably asking you for money for these games, the Fortnite bucks, whatever it's called. I don't know, V-Bucks, I'm sorry. But the Robux and stuff like that, like they're asking you for money to buy these digital clothing for their avatars, right? And so that's a huge thing as far as like in the gaming industry. But then anyone use Snapchat or like an Instagram filter or anything like that? And it changes your appearance, and some of them, it can change like the clothing that you put a hat on it. So that's basically digital clothing. So if you think about how that would impact sustainable fashion, there's a lot of people, like, for example, that don't want to wear the same outfit. They don't want to be seen in the same outfit. Everyone's an influencer now. So think about if they have like these digital clothing, right, that they can wear and change their outfits and things like that. I mean, most people that see me probably see me online, right? Like not in person. So here I can wear the same thing every day, but when I'm online, I can change up my outfit if I want. So and a lot of companies are getting into the online space, like Forever 21, H&M. Really, I think it's more of to add to their business model, money to their business model. But there's like influencers. I don't know. Have you heard of like a clothing haul? So some of you have, right? Where they'll go to like H&M or some other store, they buy a ton of stuff, and they'll be like, and they'll try it on, and this is cool. And there's just like YouTubers that do that all the time. So perhaps if there was like a digital version of that where they don't have to do all that stuff, but you still get I can wear different outfits and things like that. Or even for brands that want to produce things more sustainably, and they have this like $200 garment that's made out of, sustainable, organic, ethically made cotton, but maybe they have an opportunity to also make money to sell digital garments that maybe have more, they can make the garment out of water, or make it look really cool or something like that, some type of design that can help people. Another way is, so here I have talking about blockchain technology. Has anyone heard of blockchain? Blockchain, yeah, okay, so most people have, that's cool. So basically, blockchain, it helps to have things more transparent and traceable. So for a brand that's making a garment, and they have this now, we can scan a QR code, you can tell exactly where that garment has been on the supply chain. Like what farm did the cotton come from? Who made the clothes? How much are their garment workers getting paid, right? So that technology is helping to make things more transparent and more traceable and trackable, right? And so that is something that a lot of brands are using and looking into. The interesting thing is that if you go to like a larger brand, they have no idea like what's happening on their supply chain. Like they may know, sometimes they don't even know who's manufacturing the clothes, right? But if you go to like a local brand and you ask them, okay, where'd you get your fabric from? Or they can actually tell you what their supply chain is, right? You should, ask them that question. Brands not necessarily, especially in the fashion industry, cannot be 100% sustainable. So understand that, but there's a lot of brands that are trying to actually know what their supply chain is. Let's talk about AI for a little bit. So AI, as far as AI goes, there are companies like Stitch Fix that are using AI to assist them. So there's another company, I think it's called ThreadUp. I'm sorry, ThreadUp. They both use AI, right? But basically, so there's places where you can take all your clothes that you don't want, ship it to them. They put it online, and if you can imagine how many clothes that is, it's a lot, right? So they will use AI to help you to find the particular garment that you want. So you want it in a certain color, you want a dress, you want it cut a certain way, then the AI helps to assist to get you that garment that you actually want. There's also like digital fashion shows. There's virtual try-on technology. So I know Dina has probably maybe heard a speech from her. But basically what happens is that now that we have these digital tools, you can actually try on garments that will actually look like it would look on you in real life, right? And so there's AI in that, there's, it could be AR and things like that, that this technology really helps you to be more sustainable, because if you think about the returns and how it fits, if you, excuse me, if you knew that ahead of time, then you would be less likely to return the garment. And then there's also technology that helps people as they're creating clothes. There's actually an issue with, as you're a designer and you're creating clothes and there's a lot of samples and things like that you have, that is also ends up in the landfill typically, or at Turnip Green Creative Reuse or something like that, right? But that helps this digital process, it helps with the sampling process where you can have something out there. You don't even have to produce it. You can bring it out to your customers and say, hey, do you like this shirt? And it actually looks like the shirt that you're about to produce. They say yes, and you make it, or they say no, and you don't make it. And then that's a more sustainable way. So definitely technology helps with that. So that is pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions? Any thoughts? Did you learn anything new?
Yeah, I just have